What up, Jay? I think you are the first. I'm not 100% sure, but you're the first to actually make a little comment / chat. Hopefully we have enough people to do the Kahoot today. Hello, Aryan. What is up? We're gonna wait a little bit and see. Actually, let's go here and see if anyone wants to join for the Kahoot today. Do a little genetics review. The only issue with Kahoot through a stream is there's a delay. But I've set the questions to have like a minute of time, which will hopefully account for that delay. So I'm just gonna leave the game pin up. It won't start for a few minutes. It's only 7:06, so let's just wait maybe another 5 minutes or so. I think that probably makes more sense. Just in case people take a little while to get here. On the upside, I've been reading a little bit about the Omicron variant, and it seems like it's not that bad. Like, obviously it's not great to have like variants popping up, but from what I'm learning about it, it seems like it's pretty mild as far as the symptoms. It seems like vaccines are still seemingly effective. Against it. Like, I'm reading this little CNN post about it, and then apparently the first confirmed case of Omicron variant is in US as of today, or in California actually. United States first confirmed case of the Omicron. So this term Omicron, I have to figure out how are COVID variants named. I think it's to do with the alphabet, right? Like alpha, beta, delta, gamma. So this would be O, right? So let's see. The World Health Organization began naming the variants after Greek letters to avoid public confusion and stigma. The naming system announced by the World Health Organization in May makes it easier. For example, the variant that emerged in India is not popularly known as B1617.2, rather it's known as Delta, the fourth letter of the Greek alphabet. There are now 7 variants of interest or variants of concern, and they each have a Greek letter according to the World Health Organization tracking page. Some other variants with Greek letters do not reach these classification levels, and the World Health Organization also skipped 2 letters just before Omicron, Nu and Z, leading to speculation about whether Z was avoided in deference to the Chinese president Xi Jinping. Interesting. And the Nu is too easily confounded with new. Wow, I didn't realize that they would do that. I guess it kind of makes sense because you don't want to hear about because then it would be confused. There's the new COVID variant. New. Yeah, that would be confusing. So I can understand skipping that. But the skipping Xi because of Xi Jinping seems a little bit weird, but I guess maybe because of like the anti-Asian hate that's sort of come around because of the COVID virus. I guess I could understand that. What's up, Akash? I guess I could understand that. Maybe you don't want to like have a variant that you're using a Greek letter that has some potential, even if it's vague, connection to China, to like feel that more. Omicron. He added that the agency's best practices for naming diseases suggest avoiding causing offense to any cultural, social, national, regional, professional, or ethnic groups. Some of the better-known variants, such as Delta, rose to a variant of concern. Others in that category were named Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. But I guess these ones didn't rise to a level of concern. They were like more of minor variants. Others emerged which were variants of interest, Lambda and Mu. Other Greek letters were used for variants that did not meet those thresholds, but Nu and G were skipped. Okay, makes sense. All right, looks like we have 8 people in the Kahoot. I see we have at least, according to my stats on my page, I see 13 people watching. So if you want to play the Kahoot, get in. I would say that we'll probably start it within the next 5 minutes. Try and start it by like 7:15. In a White House news briefing, Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, said the case was an individual who traveled from South Africa on November 22nd before restrictions were in place and tested positive on November 29th. Okay, so the person who's in California that has this variant literally came from South Africa right before. Got it. Person was fully vaccinated and is experiencing mild symptoms which are improving at this point. So they were fully vaccinated. California and San Francisco public health departments confirmed the case was caused by the Omicron variant through genomic sequencing conducted at the University of California, San Francisco, and the sequence was confirmed by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So do they always sequence the genome when you get a COVID test to determine what variant you have? I don't think so. They probably just did it particularly for this person because he literally was coming from South Africa, where the variant was originating from. Actually, that's a good question. Do they... This is the FDA, so this should be pretty reliable. Wait, where is the question? Oh, here it is. Here we go. There are no authorized COVID-19 antigen or molecular tests that specifically report the presence of SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant. Currently, COVID-19 tests are designed to check broadly for SARS-CoV-2, including SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant. It is common for all viruses to change and mutate over time, resulting in different virus strains. The FDA worked closely with test developers to identify potential impacts of virus mutations. So it seems like, my guess is that how they figure out that new variants are arising is not from people who are getting COVID tests, but they probably are sampling. What I'm guessing is there are like research centers who take some samples of COVID tests and are sequencing them and just sort of looking for variants that pop up in communities. All right. 1 minute and we'll start this little Kahoot situation on genetics. Akash, do you think you have good memory of Punnett squares? All right, Jay, take it easy. I will see you later. Oh, I reached my limited articles on New York Times. Got paywalled. What up, Geez Louise? How are you? We're playing a little Kahoot today for some genetics review, so if you're interested in testing out your genetics knowledge, you're more than welcome to join. Not too many people here, so we only have 9 people in the Kahoot so far, so it's going to be a pretty small little group. Oh, we got 10. You got first on the evolution. I remember you used to be pretty hot. You used to be in the top 5 pretty frequently, if I remember correctly, back from the days. Okay, it is 7:16, so we're gonna go ahead and start up this Kahoot. So we'll just play through here. And we'll go over them if I feel like they need to be talked about. So keep in mind, remember, there is a delay. In the sense that I think it's like if you're watching on YouTube, I think it's a little bit of a longer delay than on Twitch. So Twitch, I think, is anywhere from like 4 to 5 seconds. And then YouTube is more like 7 to 10, if I remember correctly. But I could be wrong. But I have built in enough time, so you should have enough time to answer. Okay, let's go. So we'll start it off. Alrighty. So this one, I hope this question made sense. So just to explain, because there wasn't a lot, most people got this one actually wrong. So right off the bat, not looking too hot. So for this particular question, Mike, the intent of the question was literally just to be the relationship. What I mean by relationship is, oops, 1 second, is which ones make up which ones. So let me show you. Let me use my let me see, 1 second. Hold on. Sorry. I'm trying to pull up something. And I lost my window here. Oh, here we go. There it is. Got it. Okay. So what I want to do There we go. Okay. So I'll pull up a little paint thing. So what I mean by which of the following shows the correct relationship is the reason why red is correct here is because DNA makes up genes which make up chromosomes. So it's the order of which makes up which. So chromosomes are the largest, genes are smaller and make up chromosomes, and then DNA is sort of the basic molecule that is composed. So a good example of that would be if I have, if here's usually we draw chromosomes kind of like this. So here's a chromosome, and then we might have like a particular region of a chromosome here that I'm drawing in blue. This would be a gene, right? And you might have multiple genes. Maybe there's another gene right here, and then another gene right here. So a chromosome is just like a package of a bunch of genes all connected, all along it. And then if I zoomed in on a gene, so let's take like a snapshot. Let's say we just sort of go zoom in. What I would see is this gene would be made of oh wow, that was terrible DNA drawing. A sequence of DNA. Okay, so basically DNA makes up genes, genes make up chromosomes. That's the idea for that first question. Okay, let's move to the next one. What's up, Mouse Pillow? Hello. So these first questions are just some background. We haven't gotten into the Punnett squares yet. There's only 16 questions on this Kahoot, so it's kind of a short one. So everything is going to go just a little bit slower online because I have to wait for the delay. By the way, cheers, Erebus. I didn't catch your I didn't see your Hydra earlier. All right, a little bit better. So which of the following is not true of gametes? So this is a not question. And the answer is they contain 2 copies of each chromosome. That is not true because a gamete is a sperm or an egg, and they have half of the chromosome, so they only contain 1 copy. But everything else on here is true about gametes. So gametes are eggs and sperm, and of course, they are what fuse together to form a new individual. And of course, they have to have half the genetic information so that when they fuse together, it's a half plus a half equals a whole. So they can't have 2 copies. They have to only have 1. What's up, Mr. Chang? Geez Louise, maybe you do need to take bio again. Brush up. All right, Harshal takes the lead. Question 3. Whoa. Kind of small. Hopefully you can read that. It's a long question. So keep in mind, if you need to, you can do work. You might have to draw out a Punnett square. Or you can do it in your head. These are definitely able to be done in your head if you have the inclination. But Akash, technically it's a better skill to be able to reason through to an answer than just to have something memorized. Because if you can memorization doesn't really help you outside of the thing you've memorized, but being able to reason through to an answer is actually a skill that can be applied in all scenarios. So that's the true skill. All right, pretty good. Right, the reason why they'll be 100% brown is because every single offspring will get a dominant allele from this mouse. So there is no way that a mouse could be anything other than brown. All right, blood type question. Just got home from work 30 minutes ago. Yeah, finals is coming around the bend. So for these kinds of questions, honestly, these kinds of questions are more logic based. By the way, does anyone know if Minecraft came out? The new cave, like 1.18 part 2? He is definitely not the father. Yes, he can't be the father because if the child has an A and a B, the father doesn't have either an A or a B. The father only has O's to give. So there's no possible way that he could have a child that does not have an O in this case. And just as a rule of thumb, when you do a blood type question like this that's asking you, is it possible for a person to be the father? Realistically, you can use blood type to rule somebody out from being a father, but you can't use blood type to prove somebody is the father, right? Because you can only use this to rule them out. Because it's just because somebody could be the father doesn't mean they actually are, right? Because it doesn't make any sense to do that. All right, here we go. Question 5. A white flower is crossed with a red flower and produced red and white spotted. All right, pretty good. So remember, when we talk about incomplete dominance versus codominance, the difference here is that codominance means both, in this case, colors, but in general, it's both traits will show up. So because it's spotted, red and white, it's codominant. If it was a blend between white and red, you would have pink flowers, and that would be incomplete dominance. So that's the way that works. What's up, Nico? How are you? Harshal still holding the lead. Next question. All right, so this is, ooh, hopefully you can see that. Yeah, you can see that. So I'm showing you a picture of a karyotype here. Chromosomes of an individual. You should be able to tell whether or not it is a biological male or biological female based off of the picture of its chromosomes. Alrighty. Most of you got this one. It's hard to see. I don't know, man, it's so small. Hold on one sec. Let me just zoom in real quick. So when you're looking at this, it's female because it has 2 X chromosomes down here. So just for like male versus female chromosomes, chromosomes 1 through 22 don't matter. It's the same for biological male, biological female. Everybody has 1 through 22. The difference at a chromosomal level between a biological male and female is whether or not they have 2 X's, that's biological female. If it's an X and a Y, that's biological male. Pretty straightforward. Blood type question. This one's a little trickier, asking for genotypes of the person. Not the child, but the person. Not that children aren't people, but... Nice. Yep. So hopefully you're able to logic your way through that in the idea that if the child is A negative, it must mean that the person here is BO, because this person couldn't have given the A, so there has to be an O here that was given by this person. So they're BO. And also they're negative, so they have 2 negatives, which means they had to receive one from the parent. So he or she, depending on the person, has to have a negative allele. So it's BO plus minus. Nice. Here we go. Wait a minute. Why did everyone get this one wrong? Hold on a second. Did I mess up on this one? Which of the following antibodies would a person who is blood type O negative produce? Yeah, oh, I messed up. Sorry. This should be, yeah, it should be red. Shoot. My fault. I put the wrong answer down there. My bad. So whoever picked that one got lucky. I have to make a note to change this. Hold on. Which question was this? Question 8? Number 8. Change. Okay. My fault. Yeah, it's definitely the red. Definitely red is the correct answer here. Because if a person is O negative, that means that they don't actually have any of the antigens associated with blood type. And so they would actually have all of the antibodies associated with blood type. That is unfortunate. I'm sorry. Akash, you got the points. Why are all the blood typing questions coming up at the same time? Yes, indeed, it's true. Ooh, this one was the JP that I used in class, actually, so this is not a new question. Yep. Indeed it is, because only males only need one allele, because they only have one X chromosome. So all they need is one recessive allele to have the disorder, where for females, because they have two X chromosomes, they need two copies, which is less likely. Harshal still holding on to first. Is anyone going to take them down? Why are these all blood? Wait, what is happening to my Kahoot? Hold on a second. Why are these all blood type questions? I swear I wrote a bunch that were not blood type. What is going on here? Somebody come in and change my Kahoot? I guess I just wrote a bunch of blood type questions for some reason. Maybe because, I don't know. Which of the following antigens would be present on the red blood cells of a person with A positive? Should be A and D. Yes. A and D. A because they're blood type A, and D because they're positive blood type. So remember, positive references the D antigen. This is a tricky question because I don't think I actually talked about this one directly in class. This one you might have to reason your way through or think a little bit critically about it. All right, so for this one, yeah, so looks like so when you think, so the reason why these are true, blue and yellow here, so imagine the case, just imagine, like here's a scenario, right? Imagine the case where you have like a flower has two different, like for a gene for the flower color, right? You've got the allele that makes the flower pink, or let's just say red, and then there's another allele that makes the flower like white. And let's just say that white is the absence of like a certain pigment that's produced to generate the color. So it makes sense that if you have like one allele that doesn't produce a protein, and then an allele that does produce a protein that determines the color, like the one that doesn't produce the protein is going to be recessive, because if you have that and one that makes a color, obviously the color is going to hide or be dominant over something that isn't doing anything at all. So typically, or a lot of the times, recessive alleles, they are recessive because the protein that they code for is either just non-existent, it doesn't actually code for anything, it's just like a nonsense allele, it doesn't do anything, or it does do something, but that's a protein that actually has no function, right? And this is also why a lot of disorders are recessive, because a disorder might be because you have a non-functional protein, right? So it's the protein is not doing the job it's supposed to be doing, and so that would be a disorder. And it'll be oftentimes recessive because if you have one copy that makes a non-functional protein, but you get another copy that makes the functional one, it's not going to show up as a disorder because at least you have one copy making a functional protein. So you wouldn't have the disorder. So sometimes students ask, like, why are recessive alleles recessive and why are dominant alleles dominant? Like, what makes something recessive or dominant? This is the reason. Recessive alleles are because the proteins are either not produced or are non-functional. Hello, Shreyas. Are you interested in the Kahoot? Is kind of almost over. We are on question 13 of 16. So, but if you have any general questions about genetics or anything, I can help you out. Oof. A lot of people got this one wrong. Purple and white are incompletely dominant. So you have a purple flower and a lavender flower are crossed. So that means but you should understand purple flower, so it must have two purple alleles, and you're crossing a lavender flower. So if you don't know, purple and lavender, or lavender is when you mix purple with white, basically. It's like a light purple. Right, so that would mean that you have a heterozygous flower. So if you cross a heterozygous with a homozygous, let's just do a quick Punnett square. Right, so we've got, let's say, big P crossed with lavender, which would be, let's say, big PW. So if you just do this cross, 50% are purple and 50% are lavender. You're doing your meiosis homework. So who do you have for bio then? You may have already taken the genetics quiz if you had if you have a different teacher. A little blood transfusion question. All right, so there's two answers here. The transfusion animation lab, was that the one where you were online and like you had to stick the needle in the person, and if they messed up, they would like scream? Yeah, that I used to use that one, but that was a flash based, so that animation actually doesn't work anymore, unfortunately. Yeah, so if you're B positive, of course you can receive your own blood type. That makes total sense. And you can receive O negative because O negative is considered a universal donating blood type. Anyone can receive it. Oh, Shreyas, I see. I thought your last name was different. You have a different last name on your YouTube name than the name that I see in class. Your last name is different. So I didn't know you were the same person. All right, we're coming down to the last two questions. Sex-linked question here. A little trickier. Ah, it's your middle name. Okay, that makes sense. Got it. Well, thanks for stopping in. I know that this genetic stuff is something that you don't know about, but... All right. So most people got this one right. All male children will be colorblind. Yeah. This is just a guarantee. So anytime you have a sex-linked recessive trait, if the mother has it, all male children will always have it because male children get their X chromosome from their mother. And if the mother has two recessive alleles, the only allele that a male child can get is the recessive one from the mother. All right, last question. Let's see if anyone can unseat Harshal here at the end. This one might be surprising to some of you. Maybe a little bit of a trick question. Ooh, so half of you didn't fall for the trick. Half of you didn't fall, but the other half fell straight into the trap. So the reason why this is a trick question is because you can't know how many offspring a particular crossing will have, right? So like when mice reproduce, it doesn't guarantee that they're always going to have 4 offspring, right? They could have 100 or 2 or 16 or 8, right? So this is a trick question because normally when we're constantly working with Punnett squares, we're always thinking in the case of like 4. So I was just trying to use this as a little reminder that a Punnett square doesn't actually show you the actual offspring. It shows you probabilities of offspring. So you can't determine how many offspring will be had, but you can determine the percent of offspring that are likely to be certain traits. So this was a little bit of a trick question for that one. Let's see if Harshal fell for it or not. Did he fall for it, or did he retain his first place position? Ooh, was not stumped by it. Powered through it. Nice. Well, that was just a little bit of review there. Which was the one that everyone had troubles with? Oh, probably the one that I wrote incorrectly, right? Question 8, yeah, this was the one that I messed up. So that makes sense why that was the one that everyone struggled with. People struggled with this one. Obviously the last one. Oh, the first one. People had struggled with the first one. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, I mean, you only need to look at blood types. I mean, maybe, but like the question is like, how much do you need to know about blood types going forward? I mean, if you're taking like, if you're going into like healthcare, probably might be a good idea to know. But blood types are also just a good example of genetics that we use. So at the end of the day, I think when we talk about like how much of like the stuff you learn in like a class like biology in high school, how much of that stuff do you like technically need later in life? I would say a lot of it is more just sort of like getting a general understanding of like the ideas of biology, less sort of like memorizing all the individual facts, but hopefully some of it sticks with you. What's up, Meta? Question about sex-linked traits. If a male have a dominant allele but the female has a recessive allele, what will the offspring have, either female or male? I may need to ask you to rephrase that. Let me see if I understand your question correctly. So let's pull up our paint pad real quick. So when you say, let me see, what did you say? So when you say if a male has a dominant allele but the female has recessive allele, remember for sex-linked females will have 2 alleles, right? Females should have 2 alleles. So if I have a female, they're going to be, let's see here. So female should be X, X, right? And then the male should be X, Y with nothing. So you're saying if the male has a dominant allele, so let's just use big B. Okay. So this is the male crossed with a female, but you're saying you have a recessive allele. Is this female have 2 recessive alleles or only 1? Because it's going to depend, it's going to change the outcome. If the female is little b, or if they're big B, little b. They have 2. Okay, so we'll do that. So, I mean, if you just do the Punnett square, right? So let's just draw out our Punnett square. Got X little b, so we got our female crossed with the male. And we just go here, go here. Oops, this is a big B. And X little b, Y. So what you end up with is, in this case, what you have is 100% of the males, the male offspring, will have the recessive allele. Right? Because these are the males right here. So this is a male. This is a male because they have the Y chromosome. Our females over here, you have 100% are heterozygous. So 100% are heterozygous. They have one of each. So if you're talking about, like, if this was a disorder, let's say that this is a, let's say this little b is some disorder, causes a disorder, a genetic disorder. In this case, all the male children will have the disorder, but none of the female children will have the disorder. Right? So in this case, the female children are kind of saved to an extent by the father's dominant allele. But all of the male children are doomed by the mother having both recessive alleles. So when we talk about sex-linked disorders, for males, it's all about their mothers, right? Because males always receive their Y chromosome from their father. So for X disorders on the X chromosome, all that matters is what the mother has, if that makes sense. Is that clear, Meta? Let me know. I can clarify more if you need. This should say 100% of females. Okay, cool. So the idea of like the sex chromosomes is kind of an interesting one. There's kind of a lot of interesting stuff that goes into the like there's a lot that can happen with the X and the Y chromosome genetically that can change, that gets weird when we talk about like sex determination. So I want to see if I can find something to show. I've actually never found a good video on this, but I would like to see if I can find one. This was 9 years ago. That seems kind of old. Well, let's see. This is... So when we teach genetics, right, we typically just say, okay, males are XY, females are XX. But at the end of but actually it's a lot more complicated than that. So really, what really actually it starts to matter are like specific genes on the chromosome, especially the Y chromosome. So there's a little 5-minute video here from like TED Ed, which may be good. So let's just watch it. It's a little old. It's from 2012. I'm just curious to see if it will actually be good or not.
My wife is pregnant right now with our first child, and when people see her with her big baby bump, the first question people ask, almost without fail, is it a boy or is it a girl?
Yeah, so this is a question that I think when you think about it, like, is it a boy or is it a girl? There's a few things to consider, right? What are you really asking? Are you asking, like, what is its chromosomes? Or are you asking, like, what is its gender going to be? So the question of is it a boy or a girl is covering up a lot of like nuance when it goes into like sex and gender. And it's kind of a, like, if I think about it, it's kind of like a weird question to ask. Like, why do people care so much? Like, why is that the first question that people ask about somebody who's pregnant? Like, is it a boy or a girl? Like, why is that the thing we care the most about? I find that interesting. So I try not to ask people that are pregnant that, because honestly, I actually don't really care. So it's not like a question I care to know. But for some reason, it seems to be such a thing. And it's probably just because culturally, sex and gender are like, have been historically like very important culturally for like the roles that people play and the way people are treated and perceived. So I guess it makes sense, but it is a little strange.
Now, there's some assumptions behind that question that we take for granted because of our familiarity with our own human biology. For human babies, we take it for granted that there's a 50-50 chance of either answer, boy or girl. But why is it that way? Well, the answer depends on the sex determination system that has evolved for our species. You see, for most mammals, the sex of a baby is determined genetically with the XY chromosome system. Mammals have a pair of sex chromosomes, one passed down from mom and one from dad. A pair of X's gives us a girl, and an X and a Y together gives us a boy. Since females only have X's to pass on in their egg cells, and males can give either an X or a Y in their sperm cells, the sex is determined by the father, and the chance of producing a male or a female is 50-50. This system has worked well for mammals, but throughout the tree of life, we can see other systems that have worked just as well for other animals. There are other groups of animals that also have genetic sex determination, but their systems can be pretty different from ours. Birds and some reptiles have their sex genetically determined, but instead of the sex being determined by dad, their sex is determined by mom. In those groups, a pair of Z sex chromosomes produces a male. So these males only have Z's to give. However, in these animals, one Z and one W chromosome together as a pair produces a female. In this system, the chance of a male or a female is still 50-50. It just depends on whether mom puts a Z or a W into her egg. Certain groups have taken genetic sex determination in completely other directions. Ants, for example, have one of the most interesting systems for determining sex, and because of it, if you are a male ant, you do not have a father. In an ant colony, there are dramatic divisions of labor. There are soldiers that defend the colony, there are workers that collect food, clean the nest, and care for the young, and there's a queen and a small group of male reproductives. Now, the queen will mate and then store sperm from the males, and this is where the system gets really interesting. If the queen uses the stored sperm to fertilize an egg, then that egg will grow up to become female. However, if she lays an egg without fertilizing it, then that egg will still grow up to be an ant, but it will always be a male. So you see, it's impossible for male ants to have fathers. And male ants live their life like this with only one copy of every gene, much like a walking sex cell. This system is called a Haplodiploid System, and we see it not only in ants, but also in other highly social insects like bees and wasps. Since our own sex is determined by genes, and we do know of these other animals that have their sex determined by genes, it's easy to assume that for all animals, the sex of their babies still must be determined by genetics. However, for some animals, the question of whether it will be a boy or a girl has nothing to do with genes at all, and it can depend on something like the weather. These are animals like alligators and most turtles. In these animals, the sex of an embryo in a developing egg is determined by the temperature. In these species, the sex of the baby is not yet determined when the egg is laid, and it remains undetermined until sometime in the middle of the overall development period when a critical time is reached. And during this time, the sex is completely determined by temperature in the nest. In painted turtles, for example, warm temperatures above the critical temperature will produce females within the eggs, and cool temperatures will produce a male. I'm not really sure who came up with this mnemonic, but you can remember that when it comes to painted turtles, they are all hot chicks and cool dudes. For some tropical fish, the question of will it be a boy or will it be a girl?
Yeah, sure.
isn't
The
settled
ant thing
until
is
even
kind of
later in
confusing.
life. You see, clownfish.
But the ant thing is interesting because at the end of the day, the queen of the colony actually decides the sex, right? By whether the queen fertilizes the egg with the sperm from the male or doesn't. So the queen is kind of going to be able to go around and decide the number of males and females in the colony by how many eggs the queen is fertilizing with the sperm. That's essentially the idea there. And my guess is that the reason for that is because in ant colonies, the males are like the worker ants, right? So you probably want a lot of males. So you don't want like a 50-50 chance just because of the way that species exists. So you want most of the, you want kind of want the default to be an unfertilized egg will just become a male by default so that you have a lot of worker ants. And then the queen can decide when to create the female ants. But I don't really know the role of female ants besides queens, actually. Let's see. Wait, hold on. Maybe I'm wrong. Most ants you see are females. See, I shouldn't talk about ants because I don't know anything about ants. And I'm talking out of my... 3 females to every males. Let's look at this. I'm going down an ant hole here. Okay. Insect queens are known as matriarchs that lay all the eggs in their colonies, but surprisingly, they can influence its sex ratio. According to a study published in August 17th, most researchers thought that the workers, the queen's daughters who actually raise the colony's young, could determine the ratio of males and females as they can kill. There's a good reason why female insects would want to kill their brothers. Male social insects develop from unfertilized eggs and carry just 1 copy of a chromosome, while the females arise from fertilized eggs and have 2 copies. As a result, sisters are more closely related to each other than they are to their brothers. Interesting. Thus, while queens benefit equally from producing sons or daughters, worker females should prefer to raise sisters so they can pass on more of their genes. Indeed, researchers have found that ant colonies usually have about 3 females to every male. Wow, that's crazy. What up, Appa? So what happens here is you have a queen who lays a bunch of eggs, fertilizes some of them, doesn't fertilize others. You get some males and some females, but the females actually have a genetic interest in killing the males and protecting their female sisters because they're more closely genetically related to their sisters, their female siblings. And so what you get is basically a system where the female ants are genociding their male siblings to the point where the ratio is 3-to-1. That's wild. So ants are like quite literally like a matriarchal dominated society. I would imagine that like if this was like a social society, you would have like down with the matriarchy. The female on male violence in the ant colonies is out of hand. Something has to be done. All right, interesting. I have not. Xenobots, is it a game? No, it's not. Xenobot, named after the African clawed frog, are synthetic life forms that are designed by computers to perform some desired function and built by combining together different biological tissues. So what's the difference between a xenobot and a nanobot? I've heard about like microbots and nanobots that are like tiny, tiny machines. But these are not machines, right? They're designed by computers, but are actually biological, right? Synthetic biological living robots made in a lab have found a new way to self-replicate. Interesting. This discovery involves a xenobot, a simple programmable organism that is created by assembling stem cells in a petri dish, and is described by a team of researchers from Tufts University and Harvard and the University of Vermont in a paper published this week. You can think about this like using different cells as building blocks, like you would with Legos or with Minecraft. The researchers hope that one day xenobots, described by the same team, could be programmed to perform useful functions, such as finding cancer cells in the human body or trapping harmful microplastics in the ocean. Yeah, I think the more I learn about like small scale, programmable, functionable, either biological things like these xenobots or like nanobots or things that are just small like machines, the more I realize like this is like the future of a lot of stuff. There's a lot of solutions to a lot of problems that could come from very, very small programmable bots. So like the future of like medicine is probably going to be something like these xenobots. The future of environmental stuff, like this idea of trapping microplastics. We're just going to get everything, you just got to go down to a small level to start doing like important work, I guess. Yeah, it says that they replicated, right? This is saying have been found to self-replicate. The xenobots propel themselves using tiny hair-like structures known as cilia. They have a tendency to spin in a corkscrew fashion, which turns out to be pretty good for collecting piles of things, such as other cells. So the team used an artificial intelligence-driven computer simulation to see how they might manipulate the xenobots into shapes that would be even better at pilling things up. An improved design yielded an unexpected discovery. For that purpose, xenobots' initial spheroid shape, not the best design, explained Blackiston. Instead, the computer suggested a C shape similar to a snowplow, or as some has observed, a Pac-Man. That shape, he says, is highly efficient at corralling and collecting loose stem cells, which then naturally form into large piles. But when the xenobots swept up loose frog stem cells in the dish, the researchers observed something remarkable. The piles of cells formed copies of the original xenobots. Various forms of both sexual and asexual reproduction are, of course, well known in biology, but what the xenobots did, dubbed kinematic self-replication, is new in living organisms. It does happen at the molecular level, but we are not aware of any organism that reproduces or replicates this way. It takes about 5 days to produce a copy under optimal conditions. The offspring don't take on the C-shaped body of the parent, but revert to the less efficient original spheroid shape. Kinematic self-replication and reconfigurable xenobot organisms. A swarm of frog cell parents push frog cells into a pile. Whoa, it's so crazy. It's so weird. A swarm of that matures into self-moving children. I wonder why. Maybe it's because stem cells are, so if they're sweeping up stem cells into piles of stem cells, maybe the fact that the stem cells are exposed to these xenobots, stem cells are like undifferentiated, so maybe they just get like, somehow they're told to like turn into this. So this is the AI method, optimizes the original spheroid shape. Weird. Very wild. So this is kind of the way science works, is somebody creates something like this that people are, that you might be like, well, what's the point of this? But then somebody else goes, you know what you could do with that? You could do this. You know how you can make that better? You could do this. And it just sort of like builds onto itself, and eventually you could have something like really wild and really cool. That's kind of an interesting interesting thing. I hadn't actually heard of xenobots. Yo, IP, what is up? How are you? Kinematic self-replication. This is a new term. I hadn't heard this before. Seems to be like also kind of a new term.
Fish all start out their lives as males. However, as they mature, they become female. They also spend their lives in small groups with a strict dominance hierarchy where only the most dominant male and female reproduce. And amazingly, if the dominant female in the group dies, the largest and most dominant male will then quickly become female and take her place, and all the other males will move up one rank in the hierarchy.
Nice department meeting.
In another very different ocean animal, the green spoonworm, the sex of the babies is determined by a completely different aspect of the environment.
I'm glad that we haven't had as many department meetings recently. I don't know how your high school does it, but we've sort of reduced our numbers to very few. Like maybe only one. Like it seems like only like one or two a semester at most. Like maybe even one per semester. But I'm glad that you're feeling excellent as a result of it.
For this species, it is simply a matter of where a larva happens to randomly fall on the sea floor. If a larva lands on the open sea floor, then it will become a female. But if it lands on top of a female, then it will become a male. So for some species, the question of boy or girl is answered by genetics. For others, it's answered by the environment. And for others still, they don't even bother with the question at all. Take whiptail lizards, for example. For those desert lizards, the answer is easy. It's a girl. It's always a girl. They are a nearly all-female species, and although they still lay eggs, these eggs hatch out female clones of themselves. So will it be a girl or will it be a boy? Throughout the entire animal kingdom, it does really all depend on the system of sex determination. For humans, that system is a genetic XY system. And for me and my wife, we found out it's going to be a baby boy.
So this video didn't go into what I thought it was going to go into. So this video was literally just about sex determination across the animal kingdom. I thought I was going to dive into, like, particularly in humans, it's actually a little more complicated than just XY, because there are edge cases or cases where you might have some issues where the Y chromosome is missing something or there's a mutation. So the genes on the Y chromosome that would normally be expressed that leads to masculine traits like male genitalia, etc., are actually not produced. So you could actually have XY females to an extent, or presenting as females. So it's like, I thought that's what it meant when it was more complicated than you thought, but apparently this is a little broader. Right, yeah. Or you could get weird situations like that where a portion of the Y pops up on the X. I'm wondering, I'm trying to find like a good video on that. I haven't actually found a good video on that. Let's see. Maybe I should search for what is that gene on the Y chromosome that's super important? SRY gene? Is that what it is? Maybe it's this SciShow. Usually these are pretty decent. What's up, Aryan? Just to confirm, if donor antigens attach to recipient antibodies, then you can't give blood. If donor antigens attach, correct. Yes, that's correct. So again, what really matters when you're talking about blood transfusions or blood donation is what antibodies do the recipient have, and they cannot receive blood where the blood cells that are being donated to them have antigens for which the recipient has antibodies that match.
In high school biology, we usually learn that the sexes in humans are fixed and concrete. Whether you're male or female is black and white and rooted in your DNA. Your 23rd pair of chromosomes is either two X chromosomes or an X and a Y. That's it. End of story. And that's essentially what scientists thought too. But it turns out that sex isn't that straightforward. In fact, biologists today are saying sex is a spectrum, and the scientific community is still working on understanding and respecting the people who fall in the middle of that spectrum. To get this out of the way right up front, we're not talking about gender or sexuality here. Gender refers to social and cultural attributes and understandings of men and women and their roles, though not every culture has only two categories, and it's increasingly seen as a spectrum. Plus, the gender you identify as may or may not be the same one as what you express with things like your clothing and behavior, all of which can also be on a spectrum. Sexuality describes who you are attracted to, and it can be equally complicated and on a spectrum, and where you are on these spectrums isn't necessarily fixed. What we are talking about today is your biology, including your chromosomes, your hormones, your gonads, and your genitals. The catch is that these biological features don't always agree with each other. And they certainly don't always conform to those high school health class diagrams that tell us there's a single, universally correct pathway to being male and female. In fact, it's estimated that nearly 2% of live births are born with congenital conditions of atypical sex development. That basically means that something in their chromosomes, hormones, gonads, or genitals is different from what many people expect of a boy or a girl.
What's up, Eric?
This used to be known as being intersex, but these days
How are
it's
you?
better described as having differences of sexual development, or DSDs. And while nearly 2% might not sound like a lot, it means that there could be 130 million people or more with DSDs. If all those people were in one country,
Bye, Trace.
it would be
Thanks for
among the
stopping
top
in.
10 most populous countries in the world. Plus, DSDs are not always something you can see. People can spend their whole lives thinking they're one sex based on anatomy, only to find at least part of them tells a different story. You see, your sex is the result of both sexual determination and sexual differentiation. Sexual determination has to do with what chromosomes you get. Those largely determine what happens to your body during sexual differentiation, the process by which you develop the physiological characteristics associated with your sex. And contrary to what you might think, that differentiation doesn't stop when you're born. It continues throughout your life. And that means there are are a lot of moments when differences between people can happen. So, of course, there are
Do I remember you? Your name looks familiar. I'd have to see your face to really know, because I'm bad with names, former names, but like I can remember faces. I'm pretty sure I could remember almost any student I had from just by their face. But the name is what just sort of disappears. But your name does look familiar. Can you refresh me as far as like what year or what class? Mohassan, could I link you the Kahoot? Yeah, actually I could do that. 1 second. Where is it? Give me a sec here. Wait. Yeah, I was gonna say you TA'd for me. That makes sense, because now I'm remembering. Yeah, didn't you? Yeah, no, yep. I can. You basketball, right? Was it basketball? You would play basketball during lunch, because I remember you would always come in sweaty. I hope this is the right person that I'm thinking of. All right, Mahasman, I'm gonna find you that Kahoot real quick. Akash, it is a lot of students. I think it's probably over 1,000. Let's just say I have an average of 150 students a year times 10 years. Yeah, we're definitely in the thousands at this point. But I'm pretty confident. I would say I would go as far as to say, if you just picked any random student that I've ever had in the past, I would say there's a 95% chance I would recognize them. That's how confident I am. All right, Mahasman, I'm going to link you real quick. I just have to fix, there was one question that I had the wrong answer. But yeah, Eric, I remember for sure. What did I Didn't I have a nickname for you? Like Easy Money or something like that? Because Easy. I feel like I feel like there must have been. I think you have to be that person I'm thinking of, because there's nobody else that would fit that. Let's see, which question did I have incorrect? Question 8. All right, here is the link. Should work. Make sure I fix this. Where do you want the link, Mahasvin? Do you want me to put it in? I'll just put it in the Twitch chat, I think. There it is. Cheers. I have to get more water soon. Let me know if that link doesn't work. It should. Okay, so at this point, hold on, sexual determination. This has to do with what chromosomes you get, which largely determine what happens to your body during sexual differentiation. Okay, makes sense.
Those largely determine what happens to your body during sexual differentiation, the process by which you develop the physiological characteristics associated with your sex. And contrary to what you might think, that differentiation doesn't stop when you're born. It continues throughout your life. And that means there are a lot of moments when differences between people can happen. So
Wait, of course it doesn't stop when you're born. Like puberty is like one of the key points in which sexual differentiation happens, right? Why would popular opinion think that sexual differentiation stops when you're born? How could you play it by yourself? I don't know. Actually, I'm not 100% sure. What does it look like when you click on that link? It just takes you to this page. You try clicking over here. Play. So this is what I see on my screen, but then again, I'm the creator, so I just click teach. Oh wait, what if I did a sign? Hold on a second. On the bottom? Where's practice? Oh, right here? Practice, yeah. Yeah. Wait, do you have the play button? You don't have this button. So the problem, I think, if I assign it, is I have to assign it to a course, and I have not added a course. I haven't added a course yet. So even if I go to you don't need a course? Okay, here, try this one. Maybe this link will be better for you. Okay. Oh, you weren't logged in. Okay. My deadline is tonight? No, December 4th. My start date is tonight. All right, my husband, I will see you tomorrow. Just going to finish up this video before I call it a night.
Happens to your body during sexual differentiation, the process by which you develop the physiological characteristics associated with your sex. And contrary to what you might think, that differentiation doesn't stop when you're born. It continues throughout your life. And that means there are a lot of moments when differences between people can happen. So of course, there are a ton of different outcomes. We tend to put these outcomes into two boxes based on visible anatomy, or what scientists call phenotypes. Phenotypical males have testicles and a penis, while phenotypical females have ovaries, a uterus, a vagina, and vulva. But in reality, none of the traits we use to discriminate between the sexes are truly binary. There's a lot of variation within what we call male or female, and there's a lot of overlap that's normal too. Anatomically, someone might look phenotypically female on the outside, but not have ovaries or a uterus, or
7 Days to Die over winter break. I actually bought the game because it was on sale.
Genetics aren't any clearer.
Problem is I'm going to be gone
for 10 days. Don't
days.
always just get
Won't have a
two
computer with
X's
me.
or an X and a Y. X's and Y's contain genes that help determine
Let me get
sex,
back to you.
with
There
the
should
Y
be some time where I
chromosome
can.
conferring the genes that enable you.
Let me look at my schedule real quick. I think I should be earlier in the break. Should be better. Let's see. Yeah, if you have time, earlier in the break. I think I'm leaving. Yeah, like earlier. Like I would say maybe like 19th, 20th of December. And then I think I'm leaving on the 22nd or 21st. And then I'll be back on the 31st. Yeah, so I'm actually gone for most of it, to be honest. But like the first weekend and the last weekend, I'm available. Okay, yeah, just let me know.
You to develop male reproductive parts. But the processes for producing sperm and eggs are really complicated, and they can lead to lots of different results. In this process, abbreviated version, specialized cells basically duplicate themselves, then undergo 2 rounds of division to produce reproductive cells, or gametes, that have half of the parent's genetic material. So it makes 1 set of 23 chromosomes. But sometimes the chromosomes don't split into exact sets of 23, and that means there are a whole bunch of possible combinations of X's and Y's that a person can end up with. For instance, people can inherit 3 X's or an X and 2 Y's. These folks are normally taller than average. Those with 3 X's have slender builds and sometimes have minor learning disorders. The people who have an X and 2 Y's, on the other hand, tend to have more acne because of the extra testosterone in their systems. In both cases, people retain full fertility. Then there's Turner syndrome, which happens when you just get 1 X. That results in female characteristics, but the people who have it tend to be shorter, don't really go through puberty, and may have mental disabilities and are sterile. And Klinefelter syndrome, which results from 2 X's and a Y, is the most common chromosomal sex anomaly. It happens in 1 in 600 male births and can cause lower testosterone production and cause incomplete testicular development, though the symptoms can be minor enough that a person isn't diagnosed until later in life. Now, there's also the fact that all your cells in your body don't necessarily have the same chromosomal makeup, which, like, what? Did I learn nothing but lies in high school? But it's true. Someone with mosaicism can develop from a single fertilized egg but have a patchwork of genetically different cells. And someone who's a genetic chimera has different cells because they develop from 2 different fertilized eggs that merge in the womb. In both cases, it's possible to end up with a mix of cells with different sex chromosomes. And depending on the distribution of those cells, mosaicism and chimerism can result in ambiguous sexual characteristics.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Genetic mosaicism is defined as the presence of 2 or more cell lineages with different genotypes arising from a single zygote in a single individual. In contrast, if distinct cell lines derive from different zygotes, the term is known as chimerism. Genetic mosaicism is a post-zygotic mutation. Post-zygotic mutation. Since an adult human being requires countless cell divisions for its development, approximately 10 to the 16th power, dang, what is that? What's 100,000, that's 100 million, 100 billion, 100 trillion, 10 quadrillion mitoses. Every cell division carries a risk for genetic mistakes. Each person has at least 1 genotypically distinct cell in their body. Thus, every individual is a mosaic. Also, probably all the cells within every single human being encompass numerous mutations that could potentially explain every human genetic disease. Nonetheless, only a minimum of these mutational events affect the individual's well-being, while most are phenotypically silent. Mosaicism appears to be responsible for an enormous amount of pathologies ranging from chromosomal abnormalities such as Turner syndrome to a myriad of cancers. Both benign and malignant tumors constitute evidence of somatic mosaicism in the body. Mosaicism is basically of two types. Somatic mosaicism, more than one cell lineage in somatic cells, although it does not pass to the offspring because the sperm cells or oocytes, the germ cells, are not affected. Germline mosaicism, the individual will not be affected. Okay. What's up, Jonathan? The Unit 5 exam? Yeah, it's going to be on December 9th for December 9th or 10th, depending on which period you have. December 9th or 10th. So the end of next week. So how is mosaicism different than literally just like mutations? Or it is, right? A genetic mosaicism is a post-zygotic mutation. No problem, Jonathan. Genetic chimerism is a single organism composed of cells with more than one distinct genotype. This means an individual derived from two or more zygotes, which can include possessing blood cells of different blood types. Whoa, interesting. So you could have like two different blood types. Subtle variations in form, and if the zygotes were differing sexes, then even the possession of both female and male sex organs. This is just one of many different phenomena that may result in intersexuality. Animal chimeras are produced by the merger of multiple fertilized eggs. Okay, so that's crazy. So it's like one person who's quite literally has the genetics of two people. Yeah, because that would be weird, because you would be like, wait a minute. The DNA at this crime scene indicates there were two people here. Yeah, that'd be crazy. This is bizarre.
Or both male and female reproductive body parts. It's even been shown that pregnant people and their fetuses frequently swap stem cells through the placenta in a phenomenon known as microchimerism. That means a chromosomal female can be carrying around XY cells, and her son can have XX ones. In some studies, these cells have been shown to stick around in the mother for several decades. But all that said, there are also plenty of people with double X or XY chromosomes that also have differences of sexual development. That's in part because at least 25 genes play a role in sex differentiation. So both mutations and relocations of these genes can result in a range of differences. Genes necessary for male development can be swapped onto the X chromosome, for example, or someone can end up with multiple or mutated versions of other sex-determining genes. And some of these are on other chromosomes and are inherited as run-of-the-mill recessive traits. All of these genes really start to be influential around 6 weeks of development. You see, at 6 weeks, the fetus has a pair of bulges called the gonadal ridges next to its kidneys, and they have the potential to develop into ovaries or testes. The fetus at this point also has 2 sets of ducts. One set can develop into the uterus and fallopian tubes, while the other set has the potential to become the epididymis, vas deferens, and seminal vesicles. And what happens from there is somewhat of a balancing act of different genes working in concert. Essentially, different networks of genes shout male and female, and when that balance gets knocked slightly askew, it can move a person along the sex spectrum. Take SRY, discovered in the 1990s. This is the male programming gene, and it has a big effect on development. If it ends up on the chromosome of someone who is XX, it can cause them to develop testes instead of ovaries. This can happen because there's a step in sperm and egg production when chromosomes swap some DNA with their partner chromosomes. And even though
Crossing
the X
over.
and Y chromosomes generally don't join in on this DNA swapping process, they sometimes do. Plus, other mutations that occur during the production of gametes can result in multiple or mutated versions of SRY or other sex-determining genes because it's not the only gene that matters. There are also genes that actively encourage the fetus to develop female characteristics. For instance, the gene Wnt4 suppresses testicular development and promotes ovarian development, and multiple copies of it
Not
can
heard
cause
of
incomplete female gonads to develop in
Wnt4.
people who are XY. Gonad development also triggers the production of sex-specific hormones, which results in further sex-specific development. But some people have differences of sex differentiation that limit their ability to respond to those hormones. Complete androgen insensitivity syndrome is one of these. People who have it are unaffected by male sex hormones because they have some kind of mutation to the protein that these hormones bind to, called the androgen receptor. And that means that while they have testes and a Y chromosome, their exterior genitals appear female or in between. There's also congenital adrenal hyperplasia, the most common DSD out there. That's when the adrenal glands underproduce cortisol and overproduce androgens, the male hormone group that includes testosterone. The underproduction of cortisol can lead to health problems, while the overproduction of androgens can lead to external male genitalia paired with internal female gonads in people with XX chromosomes. Some of these conditions don't fully present themselves until puberty or later. In fact, some aren't realized at all until a person seeks some kind of medical care that reveals them. Like in 2014, doctors reported one case of a 70-year-old father of 4 whose, quote, hernia turned out to be a uterus with fallopian tubes. But in many cases, differences in sexual development are notable from birth. For those newborns, it may be possible to assign a gender based on what they're more likely to identify as they grow up. The thing is, with all of the things that can happen during sexual development, when a child is born with an obvious difference of sex development, it's not always clear why. Looking at chromosomes often isn't enough, and sometimes a hormonal test isn't either. And even if the child's doctors have a sense of what's going on, determining what, if any, treatment is necessary can be challenging. Back in the 1960s, it was thought that growing up without clearly defined sexual organs would cause emotional trauma. So there was a push towards performing surgery on infants to clearly assign them a sex. And because of social stigmas surrounding DSDs, parents were often encouraged to keep all of this a secret, even from the child. So people grew up without knowing kind of important details about their own bodies. It's hard to get numbers on how many of these surgeries were or even are being performed. It's also hard to know exactly how these surgeries affect patients. But as adults, many report pain, scarring, and a loss of sensation. Also, people with DSDs do report high rates of gender dysphoria, where their chosen gender does not align with their assigned sex. And there's an association between gender dysphoria and mental health issues like self-harm behaviors, so these surgeries may contribute to mental health problems later in life. Though it's important to note that such issues are less likely if people have supportive and affirming parents who accept them as they are. And sometimes surgery is medically necessary, like to unblock the urethra. Also, surgery can help to preserve fertility, or in the case of complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, to reduce the risk of testicular cancer. But from a medical perspective, those surgeries don't need to be performed on infants. In fact, most of the time, differences in genital anatomy at birth aren't something that needs to be fixed. At least not until the person is old enough to make their own choices about what they want their bodies to look like. So nowadays, healthcare is moving away from a surgical approach. If a DSD is identified at birth, treatment is more likely to include therapy and hormonal replacement than surgery. Often, a DSD team is involved in care, which can include geneticists, endocrinologists, and psychologists or psychiatrists. They help the family decide if any interventions are immediately and medically necessary, and help provide care and support to the child with DSD and their family throughout childhood. Unfortunately, this kind of care still isn't available everywhere. For now, researchers are working to better understand the development of both sex and gender over time, and to gain a clearer sense of when kids begin to understand their own gender identity. The problem, of course, is the fact that from clothes to restrooms to organized sports, they are raised in a society that is set up around a binary, that just isn't binary. But researchers are thinking about how we can make our overall discussions and understanding of sex even more inclusive and more accurate. Because even though biological sex may seem like one of those things that is relatively straightforward in a very, very complicated world, it's not. And while there's probably still a long way to go to understand it, we are making progress. Before we go, we'd like to give a special thank you to our patrons on Patreon. It's because of their support that we're able to tackle complex...
Alrighty. Alright, I'm calling it a night. IP, hit me up later about the 7 days till... What's it called? 7 days to die. We'll play a little bit of that. Other than that, I'll see y'all later. Bye.